G'day legends, James Greenshields from the Resilient Leaders Foundation. Got a lot of turbulence out there at the moment, especially on the streets of Australia, but I'm sure around the world as well. There's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of confusion, but underneath all this, there's a lot of stuff happening amongst the population, amongst the people. And what's happening is people are turning upon themselves. So the reason why a group will turn upon themselves is one of three things: fear, shame or guilt. Now, I've just finished up 5 weeks of back-to-back workshops and having young men, young women, men of all ages, women of all ages, working with them constantly over the last 5 weeks, and the constant theme are shame and guilt, and so often pouring out in behaviours of control. People needing to control the situation, needing to have a certain level of certainty to be able to navigate this turbulent time. Well, if we don't realise where the shame and guilt's coming from, we'll get triggered left, right and centre, and we'll turn on ourselves. We'll start, attempting to control other people in a belief that it's right. And that's actually standing on a pulpit attempting to preach your own values and principles instead of living them. So one of the big things that's going on right now, and when a population is under fear, shame and guilt, they're easily able to be manipulated. So they can't necessarily critically think for themselves. And yes, I've been keep saying one of the biggest talents that we've lost as a humanity at the moment, in my humble opinion, is the ability to critically think for ourselves. And the only way you can critically think for yourself is to know who you are and what you stand for. And so that means understanding, and not only understanding, but living from a heart space, your principles and your values. So you know in any moment when a person is telling you to do something that is in violation of your principle and value, and you will turn around and say, no, I will not do that. Now, if you don't know your principles and values, then you run the risk of violating them on a constant daily basis and ending up pouring guilt and shame into your buckets. What do I mean by buckets? I mean your reservoirs of suppressed emotion. And they go into a thing called the shadow. And that shadow then is the rudder to our behaviours and our interactions with people. And then so often what happens is, unbeknownst to us, we're reacting in emotion to people that we love. Have you ever gone ballistic over a trivial event before? Have you ever cried a river over something that realistically wasn't that sad? Or have you ever stopped yourself putting yourself out there for fear of judgment, fear that you'll be embarrassed? Then what's happening is fear, shame and guilt are ruling the roost and guiding your behaviour through. Now, when a person acts in emotion, they're acting from a wound. So if we're watching a person and we react or get triggered by them projecting their crap onto us, by them acting in a wound, we're getting dragged into the situation, and we'll literally get dragged into their battlefield, and they should just about win all the time because it's their battlefield. And this is the whole point about being able to hold space for people in such a critical time right now. We need more people to step out of emotion and see clearly, and then watch when people act in emotion and do not react. Do not get involved. Just sit, hold space, and allow them to just flow it out the way it naturally does. And if they're attempting to impact us, that's when we turn around and we establish a personal boundary. Now, people need to learn personal boundaries if you want to operate in a space of uncertainty. And they need to, in a place of uncertainty, we need to know what we stand for more than ever. And this is why lots of men go to the mines, and a lot of studies are being done currently. In places like Moranbah, if a site manager hasn't had a person turn up to work, 9 times out of 10, they're going to get them out of a noose because they've taken their own life, because they've made a choice in life which is not aligned with their heart space, because they've operated out of fear, in other words, the need for money, and it's taken them completely into a disconnected realm. And that disconnected realm is the hub of guilt and shame, and it's also the flicks into a place of numbness. So it becomes so numb to the pain that life is like opposite the other side of a glass window, and it's called disassociation. And if you've ever been there, it can be terrifying and intoxicating all at the same time. So what we need to do is be able to allow ourselves to come back in and feel the emotions, but not react in them. taking time out on a daily basis for yourself just to be on your own, just to take your own deep breaths through your nose is #1 priority right now. I would completely recommend turning off most mainstream media for the simple fact that the narrative is built in guilt, shame and fear. And anything that is built in guilt, shame and fear is a corrupted narrative. So what to listen to? Listen to things which resonate for you in your own heart. Now, 2,500 years ago, the best psychologist ever to walk the face of the planet, a guy called Siddhartha Gautama, Lord Buddha, said it himself, and he was an enlightened being. He said, don't believe a single word I say to be true unless you know it resonates in your own heart space. We've forgotten that. So right now in these turbulent times, coming back to our own heart space and listening, not only with our ears, not only with our brain, but our heart to feel what resonates with us. And if this message doesn't resonate with you, then please turn it off. Please do not listen anymore because it's not for you. But if it does, then allow yourself the time and space to go inside, to have a look and investigate what's yours, what's been triggered by you at the moment in the outside world. And then do that healing. Because if you don't do that healing, you'll walk outside and I'll guarantee the universe beautifully will present the problem or the challenge right in front of your face. And do you get swamped by the situation, or are you able to navigate it through reason and through a heart-centered engagement? If you don't, you violate your own inner code. You violate your inner code. I just spoke to a bunch of men that are graduating an amazing program down in Shepparton by a guy called Dale Wright and what's your first name, brother? Sidebottom. Sorry, man, I've forgotten your first name. But Sidey and Dale have put this amazing program together, and I just spoke to the graduates of this program, and I talked to them about this. Now, this is a 1912 cavalry sabre, or sword, I should say. And if you look at it, on the actual blade, right there, is the coat of arms. And it's the King's coat of arms because it was made in 1912 with George Reginald V was the king. A warrior never draws their sword unless it comes from guidance from a royal decree. In other words, from your heart space. And what do I mean by sword? I don't just mean this physical sword. I mean when you start yelling or projecting at another person, that's not from the heart. When you start putting someone down or trying to manipulate them, that's not from the heart. That's from fear that you don't have power unto yourself to stand as a sovereign being and operate and get what you truly want. And that's fear-based. So you'll attempt to manipulate or you'll attempt to cajole them. Use of a sword is an honourable thing, but you've got to hold the actual responsibility of using it, which means you've got to remember it's got to come from the heart space. So when you're out there, if you're operating in guilt, shame or fear, that is not from the heart space. You are not helping humanity move forward. In my humble opinion, we've got to start remembering it's not economics for humans to exist, it's humanity itself. So we've got to learn, if we want to move forward, we've got to learn some deep, hard-seated lessons. And the situation currently in Australia and the world, because of the current narrative which is being given to us, is the perfect opportunity to work out what we truly stand for, what truly matters to us, and how to truly live that on a daily basis, moment by moment. And that is the way forward. No other way. There is no saviour coming. I'm here to tell you, there's no saviour coming. If you look at all the messages of all the ancient traditions, they say the saviour is already here, and it exists in here. And that means understanding who I truly am and on a daily basis, respecting that, understanding the sacredness of it, and then living that on a personal basis. Exemplifying it from a personal position, personifying it is another way to say it. That is the only way forward. And when we do that, people will see us truly, and they will be magnetised to our light. There is an incredible dark witch out there, and anyone who knows masculine and feminine will know exactly what I'm talking about. There is a dark feminine energy out there at the moment, and she needs to be gone into, and she needs to be moved through, owned, and allowed to go back into her place. But she has no position in a narrative for this country moving forward. Only love and unity does, which means we need to allow ourselves to forgive the past, and we need to construct a narrative moving forward. And it's time if we choose to do that. But you don't need to wait for a politician to give it to you, because, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't figured this out, they can't. They can't give it to you. It's time for us to step up as individuals, families and communities to do that ourselves. And that's why we've always said every situation on the planet it can be solved at a community level within a global context. But it takes us to hold our swords and go, enough. I will live from my heart space, and I know that to be pure and that to be enough. And the more people do it, we don't need the whole population to do it. If you know anything about change management, you only need about 17% to go into the tipping point. We just need a few people in the kookaburra in our calls, and tells you that what I'm talking about. So what we need is the people to actually live from that place. And when they're living from that place, everything else will be taken care of itself. I trust that's been worth it. Remember, guilt, shame and fear can be owned, healed, integrated and transmuted. And that means we transcend. Love yous all. Cheers.